Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm Corinna Gore, and I'm the executive director of the Center for Earth Ethics. We sometimes call it CEE. So CEE works at the intersection of ecology and ethics to change the dominant value system from one that's based on short-term material gain or monetary gain uh, to one based on the long-term health of the whole community of life. And of course, that has made the climate crisis one of our main areas of focus, and we have our work cut out for us. We're based at Union Theological Seminary, and we take religion, spirituality, and belief systems very seriously in our discernment of earth ethics. We are very excited today to especially welcome faith-based leaders and groups, as your voices are really essential in this time. This is a very important webinar that we're convening, and I'm going to, in a moment, introduce our main speaker. For years, as part of our advocacy efforts, Center for Earth Ethics has been warning about the dangerous climate impacts posed by fossil fuels. And that includes methane, which is the primary component of what we call natural gas. As you will hear from Tim Guinee shortly, this particular fossil fuel is a very tricky one and has had a big PR campaign behind it. It's a campaign that has resisted the reality that we have alternative energies now and renewable energies that are healthier for people and planet and climate. And it's a very interesting history and story, and we have just an absolutely fantastic storyteller and communicator to take us through it. So the center actually, the Center for Earth Ethics mainly engaged this work around natural gas in the past through our efforts joining with communities that were resisting the build out of fossil fuel infrastructure, fracked gas infrastructure in particular. And so I just want to say for a moment, just to recognize for those of you who are here that might have been part of that work, that included work against these pipelines, the Constitution pipeline, the West Roxbury lateral pipeline, the Atlantic Coast pipeline, and the infamous Mountain Valley pipeline, and in particular worked on some of those with Tim Guinee himself. So just to note that. Today, we're very excited to convene this webinar, this conversation about another face of this issue, and that is the gas stoves that so many of us have in our homes, very close to home indeed. So leading our discussion today will be Tim Guinee, who is noted not only for his brilliant acting, he is a professional and extremely accomplished actor, but also for his activism. And by that, I mean leadership as a protector of air, water, land, nature, and especially those people who are most vulnerable to these systems that completely disregard their health and well-being. So Tim is a leader in the Climate Reality Project, a very important partner organization for the Center for Earth Ethics. He's president of Climate Action Now. He's legislative coordinator for the New York Climate Reality Chapters Coalition, and he's a veteran of numerous climate campaigns in New York and around the country. He's also a member of the Center for Earth Ethics Advisory Board. We're super grateful for that. And I personally have been so honored and fortunate to be working with him in the trenches in certain ways, and always inspired by him, especially in this moment right now. Here we are in December 2024, in the circumstances that we're in. We are very honored and grateful to have words from Tim Guinee. Turning it over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Corinna. I'm first just, I want to talk about the moment we're in, but I want to talk about, make sure I thank the Center for Earth Ethics, which does extraordinary work. And I want to thank each and every one of you who is here. You're all irreplaceable in the struggle. Your voices matter. The difference is in you, in your ability to step forward in a moment that can feel very difficult to a lot of us. There was a New York Times piece today talking about how many people are not wanting to engage, are wanting to not read the newspaper, not see what's happening on the news, expressing feeling tired. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for showing up if you're feeling those things and if you're not feeling those things. But also that character is defined not in moments of ease, but in moments of hardship. That the mettle of a sailor isn't defined when his ship is becalmed at anchor, it's in the maelstrom. And we know there are frightening clouds on the horizon. There's a poem by a great Spanish poet named Antonio Machado that says, mankind owns four things that are no good at sea: rudder, anchor, oars, and the fear of going down. So I hope we won't be afraid of the storm that's coming. I hope that Rudyard Kipling has this expression about the storm, which is whinny in the spray, like a horse, whinny in the spray. I hope we can all whinny in the spray together. And I'm really excited that you're here. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about a bill that's dealing with the situation and just a gas situation writ large. And I think that the ethical and faith-based communities have an extraordinary position to be helpful in all this. And I want to make sure I talk about that at the end. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Oh, sorry, there are things from Zoom getting in the way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this thing called the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act. The Healthy Homes Right to Know Act is a bill that simply would allow consumers to understand health hazards inherent with using gas stoves. So we create a more informed purchasing decisions in New York. So just to sort of back up about so-called natural gas. 1821, a guy named William Hart built America's very first natural gas well right here in New York, in Fredonia. And they then claimed that William Hart was the father of natural gas, even though indigenous folks had been seen burning natural gas about 200 years earlier on the shores of Lake Erie. Still, this guy was the father of natural gas. And this ushered in this colossal industry. The total revenues from the oil and gas industry totaled about $4.3 trillion in 2023. So what is natural gas? Well, you guys know natural gas is a fossil fuel energy source. It's naturally occurring. It's actually a kind of soup of gases, and it's very different depending on where it's sourced. But the main thing is that 80+% of that mixture is methane. So it's also called fossil gas. It's also called methane gas. And there is a kind of construct in the environmental community that the phrase natural gas is a marketing moniker. But in truth, natural gas is descriptive. It is naturally occurring. Now, that often conveys with people an idea that something is good for you if it's natural. So I will just mention other naturally occurring things include plutonium, arsenic, the bubonic plague, and the meteorites that wiped out the dinosaurs. But there is this notion that something natural is helpful and good for you, and the gas industry has really run with that in their marketing. So here's an old ad: quick heat, clean heat, healthful heat with gas. And you can go through a lot of these and find health mixed into their marketing. Their advertising stuff goes way, way back and has been extensive and extraordinary.
Today, where food is finest, it's cooked with gas. And here's Miss Julia Need to show you one.
Hello. Look at my collection of famous menus. New York's Store Club, Chicago's Pump Room, Romanoff's in Hollywood, and Antoine's in New Orleans. They certainly bring back memories of wonderful meals. Meals, I'm proud to say, cooked with gas.
Hello, Miss Julia Mead. I don't know why she's proud that it's cooked with gas, but one of their other things is that the only way to cook good food is on gas stoves. Oh, and I'm really excited. I think Chris Galarza just joined us, who is a chef who can maybe take a moment later and explain to you why this is another untruth, that the great cooking can now be done on induction stoves as well. But I would not suggest that the advertising industry makes things up. However, you can judge based on their history whether or not that's true. Between 2008 and 2018, the oil and gas industry spent 2.2 billion with a B dollars on advertising and public relations. And it's all around the world. Here's healthier meal with healthier gas. This notion of let's make this thing seem like the healthy choice has been a global campaign. They also recognize that brand loyalty starts really young, as many industries do. So, for example, this is a coloring book that was created. It was sent to thousands and thousands of children through public schools. It's a natural gas coloring book. This business of marketing to and using children in marketing, to me, is very reminiscent of work done by big tobacco. Here's something absolutely terrible that I can't not share with you.
Yes. Cooking with gas.
Cooking with gas.
We all cook better when we're cooking with gas.
Gas is so hot it's not on when it's off. It's the only way to cook. That's what I was taught.
So that song, although it says cooking with gas, is actually called rapping with gas, in case any of you want to put it on playlists so you'll never forget it. But I imagine there were some very proud old white guys like me sitting around a boardroom, very happy and excited about that song. So this is what they're doing recently. And I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, about $300,000 got spent paying influencers on Instagram to promote gas stoves. So here's the interesting thing. The vast majority of money that is spent on advertising for gas appliances is spent on gas stoves, but gas stoves only represent 2.9% of what all those appliances are. The rest of them are gas water heaters and your furnace and gas dryers. And yet they spend all that money on that. And why do they do that? I think it's because they have powerfully given people an emotional connection to the gas stove through their advertising campaigns. And they know that if you hook up a pipe into your house to have a gas stove, that is an entryway to also let in gas water heaters and furnaces and all the rest of it. So central to all of this is the component of the advertising campaign that creates an emotional response. Americans buy between 8 and 10 million stoves every year. During the time I'm talking to you, about 342 new stoves will be purchased. Those purchasing decisions really matter because on average, stoves last between 16 and 18 years in a home. And all of those advertising dollars have to be really effective because 56% of Americans consider natural gas to be clean energy. And if you linguistically, I think it's interesting, if you change the phrase natural gas to methane gas, that number of 56% goes down to 19%, which also suggests to me most Americans don't understand that methane essentially is natural gas. So-called fugitive methane, it also, we should note, is released all along the production and distribution phases of natural gas. And new data shows about 4 times as much methane is being released from the oil and gas industries as the EPA estimated. In the first 20 years methane is released, it has a global warming potential that is like 84 to 87% as bad as carbon dioxide. And those 20 years are important because those are the 20 years when we most need to deal with the climate crisis that we're facing. And yet, with all of that going on, the industry claims that natural gas is a so-called bridge fuel. So the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act is a bill that would require warning labels on new gas stoves that would alert potential buyers that gas stoves, all gas stoves and ovens, emit carbon monoxide, benzene, formaldehyde, and nitrogen dioxide as combustion byproducts. They also, and the pipes leading to them, release lots and lots of other chemicals as well. A recent study by the T.H. Chan School of Public Health at Harvard University showed 296 other unique chemical compounds, along with methane, 21 of which were federally designated as hazardous air pollutants in the gas that is being pumped into homes in the Boston area. Again, it's very different just depending on where it's sourced. Gas appliances also can bring radon into homes. This appears to be particularly true when the gas is sourced in fracking areas. Larry Schweiger, I just learned this with Corinna 2 nights ago, brought up the fact, this is such a tangential thing, but it's too delicious, that one of the early pioneers of a technique which involved tossing explosives into oil wells to fracture the rocks, a kind of precursor of modern fracking, was John Wilkes Booth. Yes, that John Wilkes Booth. Anyhow, it's important to understand that your stove may be leaking methane gas even when the stove is turned off. So a new report by Stanford demonstrates that more methane is actually released by stoves when they are turned off than during cooking in the hundreds of homes they studied in California. A new study, this just came out a week ago, 2 weeks ago, shows nearly 3/4 of methane emissions from gas stoves take place when the stove, I'm mixing things up. This is not the one from a couple of weeks ago. But Concerned Health Professionals of New York says nearly 3/4 of methane emissions take place when the stoves are turned off. And they note that hazardous air pollutants, particularly the 4 we talked about, the combustion byproducts, are actually being emitted into the homes, creating higher concentrations of indoor air pollution than outdoor air quality standards set by groups like the World Health Organization. So a recent UCLA study demonstrated that nitrogen dioxide levels from running a stove alone could do that, could make the indoor air quality exceed what the EPA considers acceptable outdoors. This is the study that was just released a week or 2 ago. They tested 700 kitchens in Maryland, District of Columbia, for nitrogen dioxide, found nearly 2/3 exceeded the EPA's standard for safe outdoor exposure. So this is a guy named Joe Roy. When we think about how much is this happening, how prevalent, and I'm giving you sort of different numbers. That last one said 2/3 of the homes with gas stoves, but he runs an energy efficiency company in Connecticut and has looked at thousands of homes. And according to him, about 15% of the homes built after 1980 have malfunctioning gas lines or gas appliances. And if you go back to the pre-Reagan era, it's 1 out of every 4 homes. 71.9 million homes currently have gas pumped into them in the United States. How bad is it in New York? Well, it's a really kind of devilishly hard thing to quantify. One way that maybe we look at it is the number of calls in New York City reporting odor of gas to emergency services. Last year went to 2,175, which is the highest number of reported leaks ever. By the way, gas does not always smell. You may not have a high enough concentration for that. And we should also just mention New York City particularly has many gas lines that are decades and decades and decades old. So this is a big problem. Also, we should note that according to the Environmental Protection Agency, Americans on average now spend 90% of their time indoors. Some segments of the population spend even more time, particularly older folks, the very young, people with cardiovascular issues, people with respiratory issues. These are populations most at risk from exposure to the chemicals that we're talking about. So the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act, again, will alert the public that all gas stoves and ovens put out carbon monoxide, benzene, formaldehyde, and nitrogen dioxide. Nitrogen dioxide has been associated with the exacerbation and sometimes causality of asthma. New York, about 1.4 million adults have asthma and 390,000 children. Costs the United States about $62 billion a year. A meta-analysis of 41 studies found that children living in homes with gas stoves had a 42% higher risk of experiencing asthma symptoms over their lifetime. I'll just mention, by the way, Tim Cross, I think, is dropping links into the chat for a bunch of these studies. So please feel free to go and look at them and make sense of them. This is another study, 2022 peer-reviewed study, found 12% of childhood asthma nationally, 18.8% of childhood asthma in New York is attributable to gas stoves. The burden of asthma also, this is the New York City Department of Health and Human Hygiene, finds that the burden of asthma disproportionately falls among specific demographic groups, particularly communities of color, where asthma prevalence is higher among Black, American, Indian, and multiracial New Yorkers. I would also argue, and we can talk about why, that low wealth folks are much more at risk for this. 1 in 8 adults in New York City has asthma. Hispanic adults have the highest prevalence. Black Americans are about 2 times more likely to die of asthma than white Americans. Black children are 10 times as likely to die of asthma than white children. Carbon monoxide poisoning results in 50,000 emergency room visits every year, kills about 1,200 people. The EPA has classified formaldehyde as carcinogenic to human beings through inhalation. Of course, we know that top scientists recognize formaldehyde is also great for embalming dead people. Benzene is recognized as being carcinogenic by the US EPA. And of course, here in New York, we know benzene is one of the first chemicals that bubbled up at Love Canal. But why go all the way to Love Canal to experience the wonders of benzene when you can have them right in the comfort of your own kitchen? The thing is, we know that these terrible chemicals are coming out into people's homes, affecting them, affecting their children's health. But studies show that people are not aware that that's happening. So a recent study from US PIRG shows that retailers aren't giving consumers the information they need. And that makes sense, I guess. If you're going to sell an appliance worth hundreds of dollars, you may be reticent to say, oh, it's going to give you cancer. There was a letter written by 10 states' attorneys general, including the New York Attorney General, including the New York City Corporation Council, to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, in which they recognize that when it comes to gas stove emissions, consumers are presently, I can't read this, but they don't have the information they need. And the letter goes on to suggest labeling of gas stoves as one of the things that we could do to deal with this. This is not dissimilar than what we did with cigarettes. It's not a ban. It's not saying you can't smoke. You can. But there's a moral opportunity in letting people understand the health hazards that they may be getting involved with. And we know with labeling cigarettes that it's been effective, that it's changed people's behavior. So just quickly, I want to mention to you what the industry is saying about the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act. So last year, the only group that wrote a memorandum of opposition in Albany was the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers. These are their points. Number one, they said, look, if this problem is really that bad, the EPA would be regulating it. Well, the problem with that is no federal group, including the Environmental Protection Agency, has congressional authority to regulate indoor air quality. And seemingly none of them want to go anywhere near it. It's kind of a political football, which means it's down to the states. I want to mention to you that there are versions of this bill in Illinois, in California, where it passed both houses this last year. We think we're going to get it across the line. It looks like it's going to drop also in Colorado and in Massachusetts this year. So this is getting nationally recognized by various states as being important. The second big industry talking point is that all of the data they say that the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act is based on is old data, and we have the newest study. Well, we have 4 studies that are newer than their supposed newest study. One from WEACT talks about induction stoves and how much less nitrogen dioxide they have. Another more recent study from Stanford University finds 19,000 adult deaths annually in the United States may be attributable to gas stove use. Further goes on to suggest 200,000 childhood asthma cases because of gas stoves. A more recent study, October 24th of this year, suggests pollution from gas stoves may be responsible for almost 40,000 deaths in Great Britain and the EU. That means, by the way, more people dying from breathing stuff from gas stoves than in car accidents in the European Union. And of course, there's the little study I mentioned in Maryland and DC that came out a couple of weeks ago. The data, the studies rather that the bill is based on also come from a bunch of trusted sources. Against all of those trusted sources, the industry holds up one single report, which they cherry pick, and they leave out certain lines in that report. For example, compared with electricity, use of gas significantly increases the risk of pneumonia and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and that electricity might ultimately be a priority option for clean cooking. It's also worth mentioning their lead author, Eliza Puzzola, actually works for the gas industry. Another industry talking point is all of these problems can be solved with proper ventilation, except New York has no ventilation requirement. And I'm sure many of you have been, particularly in New York City and Buffalo and some of our urban areas. And I will mention the Asthma Awareness, National Asthma Awareness Council, I think they're called, have identified 6 cities in New York as being what they call asthma capitals. I'll mention that the Bronx, northern Manhattan, some of the other places, parts of Brooklyn, have some of the worst asthma rates in the country. But we know, if you've been into apartments in New York City, there's no venting on many, many gas stoves. New York State rather, has no venting requirements whatsoever. So this notion of just vent things is completely specious. Also, recognizing the inherent danger of gas, New York State has required ventilation for water heaters and furnaces and dryers. It classifies gas stoves and portable gas heaters, like the one on the right, as unvented appliances. Although last year, recognizing the implications for health of these portable gas heaters, they required warning labels on portable gas heaters, exactly like we're talking about for gas stoves. So right now, there's precedent for this in New York state law, but there's also inconsistency. The other thing that they say is, listen, if you're going to label gas stoves, you should also label electric stoves, because electric stoves releases particulate emissions. And that is completely true, except all stoves release particulate emissions. Gas stoves do, electric stoves do, wood stoves do. If you had a wood fire, that releases them. It is impossible to heat food without creating particulate emissions. So one question is it even worthwhile to label something which is completely unavoidable, like particulate emissions? The other thing is gas stoves produce twice the particulate emissions that electric stoves do. Benzene can also be created on those old-fashioned coil type of electric stoves. However, researchers at Harvard found that gas stoves make 10 to 50 times as much benzene as those old-fashioned. Electric stoves, new induction cooktops produce no detectable benzene whatsoever. Of course, electric stoves make no carbon monoxide. Gas stoves do. They make no formaldehyde. Gas stoves do. They make no nitrogen dioxide. Again, gas stoves do. In Albany, cost is always a concern. One great thing is the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act has zero fiscal implications for the state, even though the financial burden of dealing with the health issues caused and exacerbated by gas stoves are really, really staggering. So what are the Republican folks in Albany saying about it? Well, this is a tweet they put out when the bill dropped. Democrats are making it a priority to take away your gas stoves. This is echoing a kind of national trope that Biden is coming to take your gas stoves. And I will just say, and both Democrats and Republicans use this tired old technique of claiming somebody is coming to take something from you. There's some shadowy boogeyman. Biden's coming to take your guns away, and they're coming for your cars, and they're coming to get your doctors. They're coming for your children. They're coming for your cats and dogs. Elon Musk says they're coming for your homes. They're coming for your way of life. They're coming for your hamburgers. Oh, the humanity. The thing is, it's not a ban. It's just letting people know. It's a moral opportunity to let people know that these health consequences are going on. No one is coming to take anything away from you. Although, given the negative health implications of cooking with gas, maybe we should all recognize that while no one is coming for your gas stove may be coming for you. Maybe we should agree with the industry that natural gas is a bridge fuel, in that it is a bridge to asthma, pneumonia, and cancer. I am really excited. I believe Chef Christopher Galarza joined us. He did. And I wonder, Chef, if you would just say a few words about, the gas industry has spent an extraordinary amount of energy pushing the idea that the best kitchens only use gas, and gas is the only way to cook. And I wonder if you could share your sense of that not being true.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for the great presentation. Thanks for the invitation to be here. Yeah, to be spoiler alert, that's not the case at all. The best chefs don't they recognize that cooking is about fundamentals and techniques. In other words, it has nothing to do with your fuel source, because you can saute, you can grill, you can roast, you can bake. All the conversation here is being boiled down to, pun intended, to how do we get a piece of metal hot to achieve the desired result, right? So whether that is getting a piece of metal hot on the inferior gas stove or the inferior campfire, or getting it hot in the superior induction range, right? Matter of fact, I permanently busted this myth earlier this year when I became the first chef in history to complete the certified executive chef exam in an all-electric kitchen permanently debunking the myth that you can't cook quality food without gas. And it's embarrassing I needed to do that, considering that the Culinary Olympics, which just happened this past February, and the Bocuse d'Or, which is happening in January, two of the most prolific culinary competitions in the world, they're all electric and have been for a long time. Some of the best restaurants in the world, including Noma, the Fat Duck, 165 is in San Francisco, Michelin star restaurant. These restaurants are all electric, right? So the perpetuation of this myth is simply by folks who haven't done their research and haven't actually talked to chefs, because chefs who've had an opportunity to work on both overwhelmingly say, yeah, induction's way better. Sorry,
I
Tim, I
muted
can't hear you.
myself. It's
Okay.
okay.
I thought it was my connection.
So I want to thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions folks have that I hope I can answer. But I also would love you to consider whether the institutions you're with, the houses of worship you're with, would consider issuing a memorandum of support for the bill. I am very, very happy to write template memorandums for anybody. I know people have limited availability to do the work, and I'd like to make that very easy for you. If you would like me to get in touch with you about that, you can send me your phone number or email in the chat, and I will give you a call or an email. But would love, love, love to do that. I think that ethical and faith-based organizations have a powerful voice in Albany, and would be great to add anybody who wants to get added into this. Anybody have any questions or thoughts?
In the chat, Allegra had asked, saying it's surprising to hear that the EPA has no regulatory authority for indoor air quality. Does any agency, OSHA maybe, have that authority?
I don't think so. I mean, it is surprising. I know EPA has guidelines they put out. I don't know about OSHA is really interesting, but what I keep hearing over and over is nobody wants it. I think especially in people's homes, I think there's probably a real sense of big government intruding, which is maybe really scary. Kusamita, am I coming close to saying your first name right?
Yes, thank you, Kusumita. Well, thank you. This is just incredible. And I should say I've been with the Center for Earth Ethics since it started, and I'm currently just started serving as co-chair of an advisory board. And in the last few years, I got my home, which I own here in Jamaica, Queens, totally off of fossil fuels. And that included getting rid of the gas boiler for heating, and we also got rid of our gas ranges for cooking. And my question is simply this. When I read about this, for example, in the Washington Post or wherever, there they have a guy named the climate coach, I forget his name, that if you get off of gas for cooking, you're going to have induction. But we don't have it. We have ceramic cooktops, and we're very happy with them. So I just like to put out there that induction is not the only alternative to gas, that cooking electrically is not synonymous with induction, since we're trying to educate ourselves. And it's not just me, my friends who are my tenants in the house also are very happy with the ceramic.
Thank you.
I would say it's an interesting issue here in New York City where, a small number of cities are, laid out with natural gas pipelines. Actually, in my neighborhood, in the last week, they've been replacing them, like upgrading the pipelines, but they're just part of the urban infrastructure here. So, that creates a bit of an environmental exposure issue or environmental justice issue, in particular for renters who can't change the what's installed in their houses, and as well as the issue of leaking, which like we well know as city residents, there's the not Con Ed, National Grid trucks are out all the time responding to the calls for leaks and things. So I think that is um, it's an issue that's built into the system here, so it makes it more challenging to deal with than in places that don't have that set up already in place.
I think that's right. I also think as we move forward to decarbonize our society, we're going to have to figure out how to walk that back, and in my opinion, letting the public understand that there is a health danger and getting the government to admit that there's a health danger then opens up certain possibilities. Like, to me, it seems if the government admits there's a health danger, as a renter, you should have the right, when an appliance is replaced, to say whether you want an electric or a gas appliance in your home. To me, this is a first important step. This will give us a toehold for, I think, a lot of other things. Well, oh, yeah, Tim.
Tim, I was just wondering, we could have some more detail about the timeline. I know that this legislation came up last year and sort of got overwhelmed by the concerns over congestion pricing. And what is the sort of schedule this year if this legislation is going to be discussed and perhaps approved this year in New York?
So it's interesting. We made a strategic, we thought turned out to be sort of unstrategic decision to drop the bill after the budget process. But the budget was 5 weeks late, if I'm remembering right, last year, which meant we had 2.5 or 3 weeks to get the bill passed. Then the congestion pricing snafu happened, and that kind of messed everything up. So every bill on a 2-year cycle in New York State has to get new numbers, and we're right at the end of that cycle. So this bill will get new numbers associated with it at the beginning of January. Typically in Albany, the first half of session deals with so-called budget bills, although when there are bills that have no fiscal implication like this bill, sometimes they get dropped into the budget. So we're going to be working on this from the beginning of January in Albany. And where we're working on it now is everywhere we can talk about it. So if you know of a mosque or a church or a synagogue or a community group or a bowling league who would want to talk about this, I will show up, or one of my friends will show up, and we'll have this conversation, because we're trying to build statewide momentum. Yeah, Corinna.
I will say that I want to have more to say at the very end. So when we close out, I'll speak again. But I wanted to note a couple of things. One is that I think you do such a great job of giving us some of the arguments on the other side in this presentation, and I think that that's such a great skill and such a great practice right now in movement building, to do that rather than to kind of caricature the arguments on the other side so that we actually don't understand them and get surprised when we don't prevail. So really appreciate that. And also wanted to say thank you to Christopher Galarza, because I think that is one of those arguments on the other side, that, this is so superior for cooking, and, all the chefs will say so. So that was a really nice thing to hear. One thing that occurs to me in this regard, is that, it comes up a lot in the climate movement that this kind of feeling of hypocrisy that, if you're hypocritical, if you still consume fossil fuels and you still are in these systems, how can you preach to other people not to be doing it, right? And I think that it's long past time, obviously, to sort of move through that. But in this regard, I wanted to share something because I went to a wonderful thing that Dayenu put on, which is Jewish Call to Climate Action. Rabbi Jenny Rosen is the head of it. And they held I can't remember exactly when this was, but one of their convenings around the finance and divestment issues was to emphasize that you can actually participate in a conversation about divesting from fossil fuels, even if you yourself have not been completely and totally sure that your own investments are, pure, right? And it was helpful to draw from some of kind of more wisdom traditions to understand that phenomenon, so that I think, just to put on the table that people who still have gas stoves, I think might feel like they're not qualified to have this conversation. Does this come up for you? And if so, how do you address that particular dynamic?
So interesting. When you were talking, I thought, what if churches only let saints in? I mean, isn't that the thing? Of course, and we're all guilty, and I'm sitting on a chair, part of which has some plastic components in it. We're all living in this world, and we're trying to move. And can I tell a quick St. Francis story?
Please.
I got fascinated with St. Francis. St. Francis, had this extraordinary. He tried to be he wanted to be a knight. He went to war. He was terrible at that. He got sick. He had this vision of Lady Poverty. He moved into a cave with his brothers, and his parents were middle-class clothing merchants. And every once in a while, the brothers would look around, and Francis would be gone, and they'd go into town, and he would be dressed in nice clothes. He would have these clothing slips, St. Francis. And it's my favorite detail about him, because in it is the humanity, and his humanity couples with his saintliness to move us forward. So anyhow, I'm off onto something esoteric, but I do think that there are people in the legislature who say, I have a gas stove and I'm not giving it up. So if this comes to the floor, I'll do, that's not the point. And we're not asking you to give it up. We just want you to recognize, we want everybody to recognize what they're getting into, Did that answer that?
Totally. And I have one more thing, unless somebody else has something. I just want to say, you've done such a wonderful thing in just for internally at the Center for Earth Ethics, bringing us into this conversation and kind of catalyzing it a bit for us. And one of the things when we were talking internally as a group that we discovered is that for some of us, myself, gas stoves are a thing that we remember coming on as a new thing in the course of lifetime. And for others, they always lived with a gas stove, and that depends on where and when the hookups are. So I think that that itself is very interesting. And growing up my childhoods were in Virginia and Tennessee, and we always had the electric stove. And then when the gas stove came on, it was like, so your PR campaign presentation really resonates with me, because it was exactly like, wow, this is so much better. And it's kind of this progress narrative that we come into. And so just really appreciating that that this conversation is also about climate and the issues whereby we can compare the kind of cognitive perception processes that we all go through in this particular very, very close to home conversation, and what people may be going through in the larger sense who are just coming to realizations around climate. And I just wanted to invite anybody who's here who also is connected to a faith community or a faith based organization. If you have any question or thought as Tim has already said, about how this could be particularly pitched or communicated that way, to please voice it or put it in the chat. We just have a few more minutes, so.
I was just copying somebody's email. Yes, it just went totally blank. Oh, I know what I wanted to mention quickly is Liz Kruger is the Senate sponsor of this. Liz is also the sponsor of the New York Heat Act, and very much sees this as if you believe in New York heat, this is an incredibly helpful bill to move that forward, because it gets very difficult to subsidize, for the state to justify subsidizing gas when they know it's poisoning people. I think feels like we're sort of at a ending place, Corinna, maybe?
We might be. I just want to see if there is anybody else. Raise your hand, speak up. If not, I want to. I can close us out. Did you want to say any closing words first?
I just want to thank everybody here so much, and I see Erin has her hand up.
Perfect.
Yes,
Emily.
Tim, thank you. What an extraordinary presentation. I mean, just loaded. I'm copying all of the links. I'm sending them to people. Tim, thank you for getting those in there. You know, there are obviously, as we all know, so many coalitions, faith-based environmental coalitions, who may know of this, who may not. And what an excellent, well, I guess we're talking about New York, but even within New York, there are New York chapters, branches of those coalitions. And what a great opportunity perhaps for consciously linking them together. I don't know if we have a sort of a hub of New York faith-based environmental groups where with one email we can contact New York IPL, the New York chapter of LSM, the New York Sierra Club, Diana's New York Network, etc. I'm not aware if such a hub exists, and wouldn't it be great to know it, and at the very least share your presentation and the awareness that this bill is a very valuable advocacy target. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Emily?
Yeah, I'll just come in. One just sort of quick thought going through my mind is, and thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate all of this. And I think part of what is going through my mind also as somebody who lives in the renter population of New York City. Do you all accept, is there any thought for like next steps down the pipeline? Say this is passed. Is there thoughts about passing bills that support renters or trying to push through legislation that supports renters to be able to make a choice, in particular if their child has health issues, or like subsidies to be available to homeowners because I know that there are a lot of subsidies. I don't know if electric, induction, ceramic, otherwise stoves are included in those, that have been encouraging people to sort of electrify. I don't know, is there anything sort of in the pipeline for what would be next or what you would want to have as follow-up?
Yes, although I'm not being public about that yet, sort of strategically, but there absolutely is. And I will tell you, it's not only me. There are legislators in Albany who have real concern with what happens to the renting population. But to my mind, establishment of medical harm is the first thing that there's a flood of possibilities that opens up to us.
Kusumita?
Thank you. In the beginning of 2020, and it's quite scary to think that that's almost 5 years ago, I was having a marvelous series of lunches and suppers with all kinds of people, some of whom I knew well, some of whom I was just meeting, to try to establish a 5 boroughs of New York climate action network. And it wasn't going to be a new organization, it was just going to be a network. But that was and we even had a sort of preliminary conversation with Corinna about having a sort of a convocation at Union for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Remember that? And then COVID hit. And we didn't follow through on any of it. Everything went online. We were trying to figure out what the heck to do with ourselves. And I think responding to Erin, it's time to bring back that idea. I still think it's still a dream of mine, that we would have that. And I think we could start just by having a gathering where people would all say what they've been doing, So, I just sort of put that on the table, like maybe it's an idea that's, should be brought back.
Thank you.
I want to just also thank again the Center for Earth Ethics, Corinna. I want to thank Tim, worked really hard on this. Thank everybody that made this possible. Please reach out to me or reach out to the Center for Earth Ethics if you have thoughts on how to be helpful. If you have thoughts on anybody I can talk to, your cousin Bob, anybody. Yeah, that's what I got.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I think it is time for us to draw to a close. And I would also like to say thank you to my colleagues at the Center for Earth Ethics who made this happen, to Tim Cross, and those links in the chat are very, very helpful. So that especially to Ned Joyner, to Allegra Lovejoy, and to Eugenia Cooper Newton in particular. Thank you to Kusamita Peterson, who's the co-chair of our advisory board, and to other members of our advisory board who are here, to Erin Lothes, who's been a scholar in residence, and all of the people that make the center possible. Tim Guinee, we are delighted that you're a member of our advisory board. We absolutely intend to follow up on this work with you. And so to everybody here, we'll follow up, we'll send information. Please also visit our website, centerforearthethics.org, where you can sign up for a monthly newsletter and have information come to you that way as well. So Tim Guinee, you are just a brilliant communicator, and thank you for making us laugh along the way in this time when we really need that so much, and for demonstrating a way in which we can really give our full selves to this time and feel actually energized and inspired by it rather than depleted, because I think right now a lot of us more than ever really appreciate seeing that through you, and learning so much. So really many thanks, and to all of you, hope you have a wonderful day, wonderful winter solstice time and holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all. Thanks, Tim.
Tim,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, everybody.
It's
All
awesome.
right. Cool.